It's a huge area with of course, with many, many parts. So we decided to take 3 bites out of it, if you will, and organize webinars first on production, with a focus on local sources, and then on consumption, and that is how our choice of foods affects the environment, and then post-consumption, including secondary use, composting, stuff like that. Tonight is about food production. After a word from Carol Griffiths of Federated Conservationists of Westchester County, and Swain, our Saw Mill River Executive Director, will provide insights into the problems and negative effects of current mass production of food. Then we'll hear from New York State Senator Pete Harckham on state support of regional and local food production. And Ken Novenstern will then moderate our panel discussion, and we're fortunate to have 3 experts who are dedicated to important food supply solutions, which provide benefits to us, birds and other wildlife, and our environment. So please mute your device. We'll address all questions at the end of the program. So enter them into the chat as we go along. And please, when you do that, include the speaker you'd like to answer them. So now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Carol Griffiths of the Federated Conservationists of Westchester County. Carol.
Hi. So yes, we are first of all really happy to be able to co-sponsor this and the other 2 programs, because those are so important. I would like to mention that we have a wonderful student intern, and we have a student network, and they have organized a webinar on October 16th on offshore wind and clean energy. There it is. I will put in chat a link so that people who are interested can come onto that. It should be really, really good. NYSERDA is co-sponsoring it. Also, if any of you know any students who would like to become involved with the student network that is working on climate change and environmental programs, I will put that information in the link also. So again, thank you everybody for attending, and thank you Saw Mill River Audubon for working on and doing this wonderful series of programs. Okay, I'm done. Anne, you can take it away.
All right, thanks very much. All right, so it's my pleasure to again welcome you on behalf of Saw Mill River Audubon. Let me start the video here and make that the speaker view. Thanks. So tonight's presentation is one of several that we're offering this fall via Zoom. You can discover those, as many of you already have, through sawmillriveraudubon.org. We'd certainly invite you to consider some other upcoming presentations. In addition to tonight, all 5 Audubon chapters in Westchester are sponsoring a virtual tour of the Audubon murals in New York City. And this is an extraordinary collection of 40+ murals all across the city. You could never see if you did in person, but as a virtual tour, you will be able to visit them. This is usually a cost with this, but the 5 chapters are covering the cost, so you can do it for free online. So check that out. We're having a community gathering like many groups. We can't get together for food once a year or for our annual dinner. You may enjoy hearing our stories of the past year of connecting people, birds, and other wildlife, and some of you might be in the pictures we're going to be showing. That's Sunday, October 18th, with a special keynote speaker, David Ringer, who's the Chief Network Officer for National Audubon, very engaging and dynamic speaker to help us consider the national view for environmental issues in this challenging political climate. So that's worth your while there on Sunday, October 18th. And finally, in November, we're going to have Jane and Walt Daniels just coming out this fall with the 3rd edition of Walkable Westchester. So they'll have stories of that extraordinary book that many of us use, covers all the places to explore in the county from the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference. We always want to give a shout out to the fact that we're part of a really large network. These are just some of the groups from Albany to New York City with whom we collaborate, Audubon chapters, bird clubs, and wherever you travel, Audubon is a great connection to know about the best natural areas, not just for birding, but for hiking and spending time outdoors. So tonight's topic, I'm going to say just a couple of brief words about it, may seem like a different sort of connection for Audubon. Audubon, after all, is birds. But we know a couple of things that connect these dots. One is climate, and birds are telling us. It's a hashtag. Birds are telling us. Birds are shifting their ranges even as we speak. They're telling us that the climate is changing, that the land is changing, and they're responding. The second thing we know are all the interactions that have always been there between birds and agriculture, positive and negative. It's a complex system. It's an ecosystem because agriculture happens on the land. And particularly with predator birds, there are pluses and there are minuses and many, many different kinds of relationships. But a new relationship has come to our awareness. And that is the relationship between food and climate change. And if you ask most people the causes of global warming, fossil fuel energy probably comes to mind. But we've been educated, particularly for the book Drawdown, 2017, good to get. And I want to share with you a quote from that. Fossil fuel is what comes to mind. Less conspicuous is breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The food system is elaborate and complex, and its requirements and impacts are extraordinary. It's a quote from the book. Fossil fuel powers tractors, fishing vessels, transport, processing, chemicals. You look in your refrigerator and, yeah, packaging materials, refrigeration, supermarkets, and kitchens. The chemical fertilizers atomize in the air, and that's powerful greenhouse gases, nitrous oxide. And for those of us that eat meat, our passion for meat involves over 60 billion land animals and requires nearly half of all agricultural land for food and pasture. And there's livestock emissions, carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and methane. And they're estimated to be 18 to 20% of greenhouse gases. But what we need to do, all of a sudden, we look in our refrigerator and we realize we've got livestock, we have farming, we have deforestation as land is converted to agriculture, and then we have food waste. And what Drawdown has highlighted for us is if you put those things together, the number one of the greatest causes of global warming is food. And so for us, passionate about birds, healthy habitats, and healthy habitats for people, we have to look and explore the questions of food. So tonight, and we are extraordinarily glad to have the three panelists that we do, really to touch on different aspects of local food production. And for the rest of this program, we're also delighted to have one of our board members, Ken Novenstern, moderate the remainder of this program. He's a local attorney. He's been a board member for us for 17 years. He also helps run our seed sale, former town board member, the town of Newcastle. And Ken, we're delighted you're here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. And to start, I have the honor of introducing Pete Harckham. Pete is the New York State Senator from the 40th District, the senator for many of the people who are watching right now. And Pete has been involved in many aspects of government. He spent 8 years on the Westchester County Board of Legislators. He has been in the New York State Senate now for almost 2 years and is signing up for another 2 years, assuming that people elect him, and hopefully they will. And Pete has been very involved in the environment and was a co-sponsor of the CLCPA, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, put into effect in New York in 2019. And Pete was also recently co-sponsor of legislation to protect 40,000 miles of streams in New York State. And I have had conversations with Pete concerning our work at Hudson to Housatonic as part of the advocacy committee for Saw Mill River Audubon. And he is always there. Whenever we ask him to do something, Pete is ready and willing and able to do it. And as I said at our climate change event last December, I also have the privilege of being able to say that Pete and I first met on the soccer field as freshmen at Clarkstown North High School in New City, New York. So I've known Pete for a little while, And so here is Pete Harckham, Senator Harckham.
And thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to be with you. And Ann and Carol, thank you. And the Federated Conservationists and Audubon, thank you for the partnership and thank you for all you do. This is such a timely webinar that you're having. And as Ann mentioned, the degree to which agriculture impacts climate change. You know, so much of the conversation has been dominated by industrial agriculture with monocultures and pesticides and excess fertilizer and you know, being exempted from the Clean Water Act, you know, and the destruction of our pollinators and so many negative things associated with industrial agriculture. And many of them are actually true. And there's a great organization called the Pesticide Action Network that has a scorecard of particularly industrial pesticides related to agriculture, but all pesticides. It's really an eye-opening report that they put out annually. And then when you look at the options of local agriculture and how much more sustainable it can be, and the ability for polycultures and for habitat restoration, for pollinators, for birds, for other small animals, the reduced trucking, the reduction in pesticides, in fertilizers, all these things. You know, one of the major issues we deal with in the Hudson Valley is runoff from phosphorus, and a good chunk of that is from fertilizer, and it's polluting our waterways, and it's costing our municipalities millions and millions of dollars to remediate through stormwater runoff, stormwater retrofits, and it causes the blue-green algae and the eutrophication that makes our water undrinkable and unswimmable. So there are a lot of great opportunities for local ag. New York State is supportive of many of them. Budget for local ag is about $30 million in New York State. We in the Senate upped that by $8 million from the executive budget. They had proposed about $22.5 million. It's now closer to $3 million because of legislative action. And there are a whole host of programs that New York State supports. Aside from that, there's a $300 million environmental protection fund that we passed. And through that, there are things like the purchase of development rights for farmland and for open space. But within the ag portfolio, and it's a very good website New York State has, or you can call our office. We're happy to help you. Feel free to call our office. Our Albany team is well-versed in this. Joel Foskett is our legislative director. David Zeiger from our Peekskill office is on right now. But there's a program to connect local farms to schools so we get better nutrition into the schools. There are mobile farmers market grants for our urban settings. There's money for agriculture environmental management plan. The two big ones that really help with local are the Taste New York program, which helps with marketing, branding, and distribution, and the New York Grown and Certified program, again, which is around branding and marketing. You know, a lot of times you walk into a farmer's market, a local farmer's market, and just because it's there doesn't mean it's local. It could be from Vermont, it could be from Massachusetts. I've been to farmer's markets early in the morning and you see the truck pull in from the Bronx. So you have no idea where that's from. So the branding is so important to know that you're buying New York products under stringent guidelines, stringent standards for quality, and you know you're buying local. So New York State is definitely in the game of helping small farmers, and there's also money for new entrepreneurial farmers, education for young farmers, and then money through Cornell Cooperative Extension for ongoing education for farmers. So this is something that New York State is quite committed to, and if you have any questions about specific programs, you can call our office, either call the Albany office or the Peekskill office, and we'll be happy to steer you in the right direction. So have a wonderful conference tonight. Thanks for inviting me, and best of luck. This is a great subject that you're delving into tonight. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Pete. And good luck on November 3rd, and hope that we get you for another 2 years and many more after that.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you.
So let's move on to our program. I'd just like to talk a little bit about what we're doing and lead into talks by Jack and Trish and Linda. I've worked with Tom Ruth, who really drives us hard and makes sure of the big things and the little things. And Tom somehow manages to get our programs into Climate Week every year. And one of the things that's significant, many of us watched a program on Monday night, Drawdown 2020, which was a wonderful event and a very nice lead into our program. It was fascinating watching the pieces on farming, conventional, well, the kind of farming we're talking about tonight, and a movie that they talked about, which made me think of tonight, The Biggest Little Farm, and also hearing about ocean farming and some of the comments there in terms of not needing any fertilizer, not needing any water for ocean farming, just interesting the contrasts. And the speaker, who I think was a former Maine lobsterman, I may be wrong on that, but he had a line that really resonated with me. He said, "There'll be no jobs on a dead planet." And so, you know, the importance of doing the kinds of things that Jack, Trish, and Linda do to make this a better place and to, in their own ways, deal with the issue of climate change. Food is a very important topic, and we're trying to tackle that. So what I'd like to do is start with Jack, and you have an introduction here. So why don't we get started, and Jack can tell you what he's doing. And then once each of the participants gives us some background, then we're going to go through a series of questions for each of them.
Thank you, Ken.
Hi, Jack.
Hi, and thank you, Ann, Tom, and Senator. I appreciate the invitation to come and have this conversation tonight. My name is Jack Algiere, and I'm the farm director and one of the founders at Stone Barns Center in Picantico Hills, New York here. I moved here with my wife in 2003 to establish the farm operation and the nonprofit. We have a 501c3 and a partner restaurant, Blue Hill at Stone Barns. And in all these years, we've really been focused on organic production. Before I came to Stone Barns, I've been involved in the organic farming movement my whole life, really, but went to school for plant science in Rhode Island and moved west to work for the Ecological Farming Association. I've been involved in lots of olive production and vegetable production over the years, and came back to New York to help start this operation, which has been truly noble and a great life experience and a lesson in the complexity of community and working together in a natural system.
All right, Jack, do you want to, if you have a little bit more, you're going to have a chance to talk more once we get through, but do you want to take another minute or two?
Sure. If you're not familiar with Stone Barns, we are a nonprofit farm, education center, restaurant, and I'll talk a little bit more about what we're doing. We're nestled within the Rockefeller State Park Preserve, and I manage about 450 to 500 acres of grassland throughout the preserve in a really extraordinary partnership with the Rockefeller State Park Preserve. a long-term license that allows us to care for the land and relationship with them. But maybe more importantly, we've done something kind of unprecedented by developing a conservation action plan with the state that really expresses the fact that all of the agriculture that we perform on our property and across the entire preserve is ecological service. And we can talk more to that in the questions that are coming and more of the details of our work. But we work on a holistic system, organic program, very diversified. And maybe to some of the points that were made earlier about a reductionist and corporatized, privatized kind of agricultural system that has largely been one of the biggest culprits for climate change. I believe there's huge hope in diversified regional agricultural systems for social justice, for ecological justice, and for real community development.
Thank you, Jack. I have to say it's always pretty magical when I make the left turn onto 446 and drive a little bit and see the fields and then the farm. And it is like you're way out in the country, even though you're only a few minutes from the Tappan Zee Bridge and everything else, but it is a beautiful property. Trish, if you could just do, about a 3-minute introduction, and then we'll get into questions concerning the topic. So if you want to get started.
Great. Well, thank you for having me here tonight, Saw Mill River Audubon. My name is Trish Vasta, and I work at Hemlock Hill Farm, which is my family's farm. My uncle, John DeMaria, owns the farm, and they've owned and operated it since 1939. And I guess I have had a long history with this farm because I grew up just a town away in Croton, and the farm is located in Cortland Manor. And we would play and work on the farm, as kids. But in 2009, I had been living out in California in San Diego, and I started farming out there and worked on a urban farm at a community college, and did an apprenticeship there, and then started doing garden education in a couple of the elementary schools in San Diego. And I had been doing that for about 3 years, and my cousin Laura, who is here in New York, called me up and said, "Why don't you come back to New York and farm? We miss you. We want you to come back." So that kind of led me back here in like 2011. And so I had to make a decision between education and production, because what she was inviting me back to do was build an organic garden and run a community supported agriculture program, which is called the CSA. So I gave up the education arm, thinking that eventually I'll build something here, but haven't done it yet, but hopefully one day will. So Hemlock Hill Farm is very unique in the sense that it's a 120-acre farm, and it's surrounded by developments. My uncle held out from selling the land, and he had been in a lot of debt and actually received grants from New York State to protect the land. So in 2006, they received funds that were able to get them out of debt, and the development rights were given to the state, so it stays open land, which was perfect for us because we wanted to change the makeup of the farm. My cousin Laura decided to be more diverse in the farming there, and she bought her first 25 head of cattle and started growing chickens. And now we have cows, chickens, pigs, goats, sheep, ducks, geese. We're very diverse, and a garden. So we've more recently, in the last 6 years, renovated our processing facility. So not only do we grow the animals, we process them on the farm and we sell them out of our farm store. So we have shrunk our carbon footprint. We don't need to send our animals off. Everything's done on the farm. And more recently, we've started working with Stone Barn. So that is also one of our goals, is to start working with other farms and being able to process their animals too. So they don't have to travel so far to have that done. So our farm store is pretty popular these days, and it's open all year round. So,
So Trish, maybe what we could do is, we're going to be asking a few questions so that each of you can elaborate once we ask those questions. And I understand Jack has a few slides that he would like to show. So when we get back to Jack for the first question, Jack can certainly bring up his slides. But I'd like to go on to Linda now. So Linda can just give a short explanation of her background and what brought her to this work, and what she's doing right now with the project, the work that she does in New Rochelle. Linda.
Thank you, Ken. And I'd like to thank the Saw Mill River Audubon for inviting me. This is really a pleasure because I love talking about Grow Lincoln Park Community Garden. How did I get here? I'm not a farmer by trade. I've always loved to garden. My next door neighbor, Mr. Neil Judice, who has passed on, he was the first person who actually introduced me to backyard gardening, and I was smitten. So as my life, moved on, I moved to Washington, D.C., and then I came back to New Rochelle and became very involved in the community. I was very excited because in 2011, the City School District of New Rochelle decided to commemorate the Lincoln School desegregation case. The Lincoln School desegregation case was the first desegregation case filed and won in a northern city. The school was torn down and the campus was made into a park. It's the largest park, one of the largest parks in New Rochelle. So I worked with the people on the commemoration committee and decided that what I really wanted to do was create a community garden to commemorate what happened during the Lincoln School desegregation case. I wanted to honor the parents, the teachers, and the students who fought to integrate the schools in New Rochelle. So fast forward to 2020, we are a 10,000 square foot community garden on the site of the Lincoln Elementary School. We have around 64 raised beds and over 100 gardeners who lease these beds. The beds are 50 square feet, and the gardeners come from all over New Rochelle and parts of Westchester, including Pelham, Larchmont, Mount Vernon, the Bronx, and of course, New Rochelle. And our gardeners have very diverse backgrounds as well. Their backgrounds are, we have Korean families, we have families from Haiti, we have families from Barbados, we have families from the South, and families from Mexico. So all of that, coming together is a wonderful way to celebrate the vegetables and the food from all of these various cultures. And we're also learning the different methods that these various gardeners, farmers utilize to grow their own vegetables. So this has been an exciting time for us in Rochelle. And one of the latest additions is an 800 square foot native plant butterfly garden. And 2 weeks ago, we were part of the pollinator pathway tour. So we do a lot of educational things. We're teaching the community how to grow their own food. We have a lot of students that come in and we do workshops teaching them how to grow their vegetables and also educating them about eating local and, pesticide-free growing so that they have healthy diets. So it's been a journey and I'm learning as I go and I'm meeting so many incredible people.
Thank you very much, Linda. What I'd like to do, we have questions and I'm going to pivot a little bit here. I'd like to go back to Jack. And Jack, I think you have the questions. I will read them right now. But instead of asking each one of you to respond to each question, Jack, I'd like to have you respond to all three questions, and then Trish, and then Linda. So Jack, how is what you do different from factory farms? That's the first question. Then the second question, your approach to farming, growing food results in fewer negatives and more positives for people, wildlife, and climate change, the environment. What are the most important benefits that result from your approach to growing food? And then the next question, in thinking about making changes that can affect everyone, how would you envision what you do being scaled up or expanded to help feed the world? And finally, scaling back down, what is the key thing that you would like our individual audience members tonight to take away from our discussion? So Jack could go, and if you could try and address those issues, and also please feel free to integrate your slides into this part of the program.
Okay, thank you. So I just have a few slides. There's whoever's controlling them, Anne, or whoever, you can go through them as you want to over time. To address the idea of factory, we're the furthest thing from factory. This is a living system. And I think one of the first things we have to recognize is that the solutions that always the best solution is a biological solution. And then there are a lot of great physical solutions, and really last, if ever, there's a chemical solution that we've all figured out how so cleverly as humans how to do. But nonetheless, there are really good, creative biological solutions that are happening all around us all the time. And the more that we mimic those kind of environments, the more harmonious the system that we have comes into play. Not just the crops and the soil and the animals that we're cultivating, but the wild systems, the people that work in the space, the nutrition, the flavor, the creativity, the art, all of those things begin to connect and turn. There's a quote that I really like that really comes from E.F. Schumacher. You know him. Small is beautiful. And in this book, he writes, management of the land must be primarily oriented towards three goals: health, beauty, and permanence. The fourth goal, the only once it's accepted by the experts, productivity, will then be attained almost as a byproduct. I really take that to heart because I think it's often overlooked because we're farming and we, as farmers, and there are so few of us in this world, In this country, there are so few farmers. We are such a small demographic. We're not even represented on the census as a profession. It's less than 1/3 of a single % of our population farming the land. So that's a pretty desperate situation, I think, when it comes to considering farmers as land stewards and people that can be protecting the space. And in fact, has kind of put farmers up against, into a situation that is ethically challenging, because we need to make up for very tight margins and all of these different things. And usually the first thing to go out the window is the care of the natural system around us, the care of labor. And that's one of the things that really needs to be changing. We are in a very particularly privileged place to be able to share these ideas and kind of disseminate this idea, spread with, get the public to really see what's happening. I mean, not just on this farm, we're emulating this, but we are really trying to highlight what kind of community effort it takes and what kind of practices are really out there to have healthy animals and have a healthy ecosystem. One of the relationships that we have, and we'll talk about Audubon a little bit, and I can talk about this map here, which I think is kind of fascinating to look at. This is some of where culture and science and ecology and stewardship crash together. This is a map of the park preserve and all of those open pastures and all of this. This is a screenshot from our ArcGIS that we are tracking a whole range of different things that are happening. This is approximately 400 acres on this map here of pasture land, with the darker purple being woodland edges, that sort of thing. This is grazing of cattle and sheep. We have right now we have about 60 head of cattle and about 250 head of sheep. We have a goat flock that's about 80 that works on invasive species throughout the park preserve. We raise entirely waste-fed pigs in our woodland lots and do a lot of invasive clearing with them. And we do some fertility management on some of the old hay fields in the preserve with hens that are sort of a constant rotation. This map shows how we're using the animals, but it also shows what we're doing in terms of conservation, which is a lot of soil testing, bird monitoring particularly, and also plant biodiversity and insects. And one of the things that we noticed is we took over the greater part of the park preserve here in 2017, which we had been doing some contract grazing for the state, but it wasn't until 2017 where we really took on this full management of all the space and put the conservation plan into action. And since then, we have gone to winter grazing, no more haying, no fertilizing, no herbicides. This is entirely a closed system, really, and we're allowing the pastures to grow back and managing them with the animals and managing the invasives with goats and pigs and a very specific kind of rotation system. And over the top of that, doing a lot of ecosystems monitoring. The birds have been really fascinating. A quick thing about this is, which I think is just indicative of the health of the whole space. And I'll try to tie it to taste. So what we want to show really is that agriculture is a conservation act, and that if we're doing it right, it should always be clear. That should always be a mutually reinforcing activity. That running cattle and sheep in the right time, at the right speed, in the right area over the top of the ground is mimicking what our wild ruminants have always done. running birds behind those herds is mimicking what has always happened around the planet. It's a fertility cycle. It's a storing carbon and building soil organic matter and improving the aggregate and water absorbing capacity of the soil. And when that happens, the habitat changes. Just a hoof on the soil can change how and what plants grow. And once that starts to happen, different insects show up. And when different insects show up, there's more food for bobolinks. And we start to see these birds return. And not just return, but nest and fledge. And their young return the following year and nest and fledge. And we're seeing that the bobolinks are a really great example of that, because as an sort of an obligate pasture nesting bird, ground nester, they are very endangered in many ways because of poor agricultural practices. But on top of that, we're seeing savanna sparrows and grasshopper sparrows. We saw our first meadowlark in a long time. We have great pastures full of bluebirds and swallows over the top of our herds. And actually just this past week, I was out in one of these pastures, actually this one, where our hen mobiles are, and there were a half dozen kestrels in this field, hovering, diving. And as you all know, kestrels, and as were mentioned earlier, the kestrel is very susceptible to pesticides because they're eating so many insects. So doing this monitoring work has really, it's reinforced what we thought was right. And it's giving us kind of a new path to look at it. And our hope is that tying these things together is really proving that these practices are doing something good and giving new value beyond the value of that animal, but actually to the value of its service to water, to soil, to climate change, to other habitat. And at the end of the day, the quality of that animal, the genetics of it, the reverence of touch that happens through all the way through management of this animal, to its slaughter, to its butchery, to all these things that happen along the way, and inevitably to our plates. And aesthetic is something that's more than just a visual thing. It's an emotional relationship to something. So when we know something more about what we're eating, the flavor changes. Our relationship to the ratio of meat on a plate changes. And all this starts to happen. And I think that's what has been really fascinating working with so many chefs and great butchers and others in the community, is that they're so dedicated to this idea that, you know, really at the end of the day, as a farmer, I could talk about how great the pastures are and how great everything's growing. But if the consumer doesn't change the way and the how that they eat, we're going to push the farms out of these communities, and we're going to see our natural habitats decline. So there's a great connection between food and this natural kind of management. I would just say that scaling, just to answer that quickly, I think that this is a scaling out, not a scaling up. We want to see more people do this. We want to see more people be able to apply this to public lands and to land trust lands, not just private. And we want to see an understanding, I guess, just to close this, to say that, again, that agriculture is a conservation act. And the work that's happening on people's farms should be mutually reinforcing a food system, a food culture, and the environmental habitats that they live in.
Thank you, Jack. And Jack, could you just talk to one point that you mentioned in our pre-meeting about carbon sequestration and soil?
Sure. Well, you know, the soil is the foundation of everything that we do. it is the live culture of what we're working on. So the more we pull off, the more we extract, the more we are abusing that, it's volatilizing, it's just going back into the atmosphere. You know, the carbon that's in the atmosphere is absorbed into the plants and pulled down into the roots, and good agricultural practices using cover crops and vegetable fields, rotations, animals, allows those roots to go deeper, allows that carbon to be stored deeper, allows the organic matter and the biological activity in there to be stronger, more vital. And the better that is, the more the capacity for that soil to be nutritious, to avoid the use of imported fertility, which we really are at the end of. And we need to be self-limiting in some ways, because it's cheap to buy fertilizer. But even when we know that fossil fuels are really antiquated, we really shouldn't be using them, and yet they're cheap, and it's easy to go back to that. But I think having what we're doing is trying to set some examples, not just to show other farmers, because I think, like I said before, there are a lot of great farmers in this country. There are a lot of great farmers in the Hudson Valley. They don't all have the capacity to just pivot and solve all of their environmental issues and solve all of their circular economy issues. That requires a community effort. And that's why I like being on talks like this with groups that are supporting conservation work and other parts of we're all trying to protect the community. So finding ways to work together, I think it's all about the soil. At the end of the day, that's the equity of this whole thing is, that's our place. It's just keep it in the soil.
All right. Thank you very much, Jack. Let's go on to Trish. And Jack, you'll have another chance at the end to just sum up your thoughts. Trish, again, thinking about these questions, how is what you do different from factory farms? Your approach to farming, growing food results in fewer negatives and more positives for people, wildlife, and climate. What are the most important benefits that result from your approach in growing food? And in thinking about making changes that can affect everyone, how would you envision what you do being scaled up or expanded to help feed the world? And scaling back down, what is the key thing you would like our individual audience members tonight to take away from our discussion? Just
Okay.
a few short questions.
Sure. Okay, well, what makes us a little different than, obviously a lot different than factory farming, is that we are diverse. It's very important, like Jack has said, diversity is what builds this collectiveness at the farm. And it also supports the land. And so we grow a variety of animals. We do vegetables. We do pastures. People come to the farm and we give them tours and they say, oh, this is so beautiful. Why don't you have big concerts here and things? And we say, well, that's actually the salad bar. When you have we have about 80 head of cattle, they require a lot of food. So we've really taken the land and we've looked at it in a way as a whole organism, right? We have woodland, we have pasture, we have wetlands, we have ponds, and in looking at it as a whole, we've tried to work with it. So we kept the woodland, some of the woodland, so that animals can thrive, wildlife can thrive. The cattle can use this area during the summer months. And that has really supported their well-being. And we're seeing so much more wildlife. We've seen eagles and hawks, herons, tanagers. Like, I don't even know a lot about birds, but I'm seeing very unique animals coming now. And I've been back for at least 11 years. And it's just amazing to me when you let the land kind of dictate, right? Yes, we have an intention and we are trying to grow food for people, but we are also listening and looking, right? We're looking around, we're seeing what areas are thriving and what areas, have benefited from moving animals and sharing this space with them, not overfeeding them in certain areas, but keeping it more equal. And I think that we've worked for years with the Watershed Agricultural Council, and they're an arm of the DEP, and they work with farms within the watershed. And we've learned a lot with them, and we've received a lot of grants from them to put in like vegetation treatment areas, so that if there is runoff and because there is a lot of manure on the farm and things like that, we want to keep our waterways safe. So we've used vegetation treatment areas, we've built ponds, we have a compost pad, we've taken, a lot of the waste at the farm is being used again. We're not letting it become garbage. It's becoming fertilizer and or used on the farm, or people can purchase it as far as compost goes. And we've built cattle pads where we can feed them in a safe environment without them trampling the grasses. And everybody's, all the animals are free to roam in and out. Not our pigs. We don't pasture our pigs, but everybody else gets to move freely. And we really feel that's helped the earth. Like Jack said, soil is where it starts. And, without good soil, you won't have healthy animals. You won't have healthy food. You won't have people that are healthy from eating that food. Now, as far as like scaling up, I don't think we really have an intention to feed the world, but we would like to be an example to other farmers. And Stone Barn's doing a great thing. They have an apprenticeship there. They're teaching a lot of the young people who are really interested in this profession, which is so important, because without food, we can't survive, right? So the more young farmers we see out there, the better. And we're always encouraging people to grow food in their backyard, which is really important. But we've also, taken on an arm of processing. And especially this year with the virus, because this year a lot of farms amped up to grow food, but there was nowhere to bring the animals to be processed, or the processing plants were so full that they couldn't take on any more business. And we found that to be a very interesting issue, and especially in this area, because Westchester doesn't really have a lot of working farms. There is a lot of horse farms, but not livestock farms like Stone Barn and Hemlock Hill. And so in order to process your animals, you have to take them far away. I mean,
How far away, Trish?
Oh, like Connecticut, Pennsylvania, or like Albany. Milers is actually in Pauling, or north of, it's probably about 45 minutes to an hour north of all of us here in Westchester. And those are the closest places. So we really feel like we have a special offer for farmers that want to, you know, grow food, because we can offer them that processing option.
So you do your own processing, and you have capacity for other local farms to process?
Yes. And then we also do community supported agriculture, which is also huge, you know, in thinking about feeding the world, right? Everybody came and called us when the corona started, and they were saying, oh, do you do curbside pickup? And I said, no, we can't take orders. We're a small farm, but you can join our CSA. And that is a really great program that helps the farms and helps the community, because you can purchase right from your farmer a box of meat or a box of vegetables or eggs and dairy, and go right to your farm and pick it up. So there's no in-between person. You're supporting your farm. We saw that membership skyrocketed because people really wanted to know where their food came from, especially in these trying times, you know. And then I think that as far as scaling back and, you know, what we can do, I think just trying to find like regenerative ways to grow food, and also to, you know, allow the environment to thrive, right? So I think it's very important that we think about composting at home, and that we think about shrinking our garbage. The landfill, we work with Captain Lawrence Brewery, and they make beer with barley, and all that barley would normally go into the landfill. Well, we collect it and we feed it to our cattle. So it's only 30% of their diet, but we're shrinking that landfill by using that byproduct of another industry and feeding it to our animals. So just by being as creative as we can.
Yeah, that's great.
Right in our backyards.
Right.
Yeah.
And Trish, is there one regret that you have? Is there something that you'd like to do better? It's just too hard? Or, you know, is there something that you can think of that would improve the climate, but
I think that we need to think about energy. And I think that trying to get off this grid is really, really important. And I think at Hemlock Hill, we are going to be taking steps to like leave the land open, but we would like to work on maybe having more solar energy, so that we're not pulling or trying to use all these fossil fuels for, you know, the energy we need to even just pump water or lights or things like that. So yeah, I think we would like to work better in that sense.
All right, thank you. And again, think about how you want to wrap up. And I'd like to go to Linda right now. And Linda, I think the questions for you are just a little bit different. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit more about some of your successes, because I know in our pre-meeting you talked about many people producing enough food on their own plot for themselves and possibly having surplus, and how you handle that issue. And I do think the question about what you want the audience members to take away from tonight, how other organizations can do that, you know, do what you do. And I think we need to unmute Linda. Anne, can you try and unmute Linda? I see. There we go.
There we go. Thanks, Kenneth. Well, absolutely. We're doing a lot of different things, and we're not at all similar to factory farms. We're the absolute opposite. We're community-based, we're a community garden, and we're located right in the heart of the city of New Rochelle. Right next to us is a 10-story building that is a building that houses seniors. And the seniors have taken an incredible interest in what we're doing at the garden. And much of the food that we grow, certainly it goes to the individual families who are leasing the beds. The 50 square foot beds are leased at $35 per season. And our season starts in April and it ends in November. And even though, you know, many of our gardeners, they do plant garlic in their beds, which, you know, grows through the winter and we harvest like in July. But the most important thing, I think, that we need to understand about creating this space in the middle of this urban landscape is that it's a public-private partnership. A group of volunteers got together and decided to create this garden. In order for us to utilize this space, we had to go to the city of New Rochelle and get permission. And we received an authorizing resolution from City Council. We were the second community garden to be created in New Rochelle. The first garden is Ward Acres Community Garden. And we're both based on the same principle that, you know, we recruit people from all over the city and outside of the city to come and lease the beds. The other really important aspect of Grow Lincoln Park is our educational workshops. And our workshops are geared to young people, but we encourage all people to come and learn about growing pesticide-free organic vegetables. And we do this by utilizing a variety of workshop facilitators who have experience in growing vegetables. In the summer, we have summer camp that is run through the city of New Rochelle. And in the summer, we have about 100, 150 kids, K through 8th grade. And we teach them workshops about the life cycle of a butterfly, because we have a beautiful butterfly garden. We teach them the elements of all the plants and how to grow the vegetables. We talk about the soil and we talk about the compost. We have a compost pile. And we have one workshop where we say, who lives in our compost pile? And that's one of the highlights because the kids actually put the soil or the composted soil or what's in the pile on the picnic tables. And then they looked at all the various insects and they named the insects and they realized that the insects, they're taught that the insects are doing the job of creating this wonderful compost and that the compost is then utilized in the beds. And some of the gardeners are growing their seedlings at home over the winter. And then they come in the spring and they plant. Some of our gardeners have 3 not seasons, but they plant 3 times in one season. And this succession growing is, you know, something that other gardeners want to do. So we have a lot of collaboration and people are very willing to share and to teach. So we have gardeners that are just beginning and we have some expert gardeners who grew up on farms and have brought their skills to Grow Lincoln Park and are willing to share. So we have a very robust educational program, as well as a robust volunteer program. We have relationships with Iona College. Their students come and volunteer. They clear the beds. We've had them build some of the raised beds. We have them, you know, do all kinds of things. One group actually donated beautiful, beautiful plants to our butterfly garden. And so we have many varieties of milkweeds, so, and all kinds of wonderful native plants. And some of, as you can see down below, we had students who at Isaac Young Middle School actually raised butterflies in their classroom and then came to the garden and released them. So we have a lot of wonderful opportunities for the students. And some people just like to come by from the neighborhood and sit because it's a very serene and meditative, space. The other thing is that a lot of our gardeners have excess food. So what we do is that we donate to about 5 soup kitchens. And during this time, the need and the food insecurity has grown in our community and all over the country. And so we have really shifted to making sure that any excess food we have, that we really do donate to these wonderful food pantries. We have several, actually we have one directly across the street from our garden that's located in the Community Action Program building. And then we have several churches who are also doing, the food pantries. So we are truly a community garden, and people, appreciate the fact that we do have these beautiful plants in our butterfly garden, and they're learning about these indigenous plants. They're watching the yellow finches, the monarchs, and the different species of butterflies.
So,
And so
Linda,
as far as,
I'm sorry, finishing. I have a question for you.
okay.
So I think it would be very helpful to people if you might be able to provide us with the names of some of the soup kitchens and food pantries that you're mentioning, and we could disseminate that. In addition, is there a way to take your show on the road to other cities in Westchester County? Or I realize it's got to be a tremendous endeavor.
Well, some of the things that have happened, which I'm really excited about, by doing talks and networking with a lot of different people, I've been getting a lot of calls from other people who want to create community gardens. The way this community garden was started was not traditional. It was started just because we were having this commemoration, the 50th celebration of the desegregation case, and then to come up with the idea of actually putting the garden on the campus of the former elementary school. We had no idea that this was going to be as expansive and as successful as it has been. And the way we started it, first of all, we did lots of research. I went around, I visited a lot of different community gardens. I went to, the west side of Manhattan because we're an urban space. I wanted to see exactly what that looked like. We went to Harlem to see what those community gardens look like, little pocket gardens in between buildings. The other thing is the research to make sure that we had the proper soil, before we actually built the beds. So we did soil testing because we did not know what had occurred in the soil on this campus because the building had been torn down. So we did the soil testing, everything came back perfect. But with the raised beds, we also, are lucky because we use composted soil. So every year, our gardeners, once they clear the beds for the winter season and they layered them with, leaves or straw, when they come back in the spring, we get composted soil from a local provider. And so the gardeners, farmers, layer their beds and plant their seeds and crops. And as you can see, our beds, they're abundant and the crops are beautiful and tasty. And so when the kids do their workshops and when they're tasting the vegetables and the herbs, they realize the difference. They realize that the difference between the vegetables that they get at the grocery store and the vegetables that they get from those frozen packages. And many of them, say that they are going to start their own gardens at home. And so that is one of our missions, to teach the young people how to grow their own food so they become self-sufficient. And so they understand the supply chain and they understand how to, grow food without utilizing pesticides and other poisonous substances.
Well, Linda, thank you. I mean, what you've done is tremendous. And thank you for doing it as a volunteer. I mean, I can only imagine the number of hours that you have put into this over the course of the last few years. And what we're going to do now is I'd like to take some questions for the three panelists and then have each of you wrap up with a minute or two. And as part of your wrap up, if you could really just focus on what you think the most important 2 or 3 points are and a takeaway for people, what they can do themselves. Tom, do you want to go to the questions? We're going to have a poll at the end as well. If people want to start filling that out, that is something you can do. But maybe Tom can help us with questions that have been asked.
Yes, absolutely, Ken. Thanks to everyone here that's been part of this. It's just been terrific. We have a question here for Trish. You mentioned that the pigs are not on pasture at your farm. Any particular reason?
Okay, well, the situation with pigs is pigs are not really a pastured animal. It also depends on what kind of pig you're growing. So our pigs are Yorkshire pigs, which are not a heritage breed. And so they have very fair skin and we would need to keep them in the woods, okay? And pigs also undermine things. They don't eat grass. They want root systems. They're constantly digging up the soil. So right now, we have a building we call the Pig Palace. And it's a cement-made building where the pigs are. And it keeps them cool in the summer and it's heated in the winter. But we don't have the capacity to grow them in the woods right now. It's a very delicate system when you're growing such diverse animals, okay? You can't really have the pigs pasturing near the cows. You can't because their manure is very different than a cow's manure and a chicken's manure. And so you kind of have to dance. And if you've been to Stone Barn, you'll see they do the dance very well there. Maybe one day we do have woodland that we would like to put them in, but we don't have the capacity to do that right now.
Thank you. Tom, any other questions?
That was the only question.
Tom, could I add to what Trish was saying? Because
absolutely.
I really agree with everything she said about that. And I hit a crossroad several years ago that I realized that we either had to stop raising, in fact, we did stop raising pigs. I had been raising about 300 a year in forests and moving them around constantly, moving them from forest section to forest section. There was something kind of beautiful and bucolic about it on nice days. And then it really just always felt like it was at the edge of disaster. We knew we wanted them to live in a certain way, but it was just so complicated. And I realized what the the kind of linchpin in the whole thing was around their diets. And this is back to the waste and all that kind of a thing. And we actually take a little bit of grain mash from the specialty batches at Captain Lawrence. So Hemlock takes the big cylinder for the cows, and we take the specialty batch bins for our pigs. And what we've created is actually, cows can handle the fiber, but the pigs really can't. So we actually we have a fermentation process that we put the barley or whatever is coming back from the mash and put it back into a kind of a kimchi. And we ferment it for about 3 weeks with some little bit of molasses. And then we use waste dairy from Seatown and bread. And they have a great diet. And that allowed us to kind of get off the grain treadmill. So you're talking about what the difference between a factory farm and us is at the beginning. It's that the conventional large-scale industrial agricultural system is a Swiss watch. It works so efficiently, and yet it's so incredibly unsustainable. So the problem with a lot of small farm ideas is that they're one foot in both worlds. We're still sort of attached to these particular conventional breeds or a feed system. So it's really hard to get out of that. And that's why it's so important that we can all work together. I said it before when we were all on the phone on our review, just how valuable Hemlock is to us. And I just can't wait to do more, honestly. Because I think that's been a huge step forward.
All right. And Jack, while we have you, if you could do a wrap up, maybe just 1 or 2 thoughts on tonight, what your thinking is, what people can take away from this.
Just know that we are all connected, that the farms that are in the community gardens, the infrastructure that's there for us to be able to get in, to be able to make what we do more efficient, our consumer demand, our cuisine, our taste buds, all of these things matter. And I think farmers have this great kind of thrift about them. And we always come back, gardeners and farmers, because we know what it's like to be around living systems. We know it's going to keep growing. And I think all 3 of us tonight could talk all night long about what we do. We love what we do. We want to share it with the other people in our community. We think that it's an incredible place to learn and to reconnect with nature, with food, with each other. And that's really rare. So I'll just say that the farm and the garden are far beyond the value in the food that they produce. Thanks for having me.
You're muted, Ken.
Yes, and hear you.
Okay, I guess maybe I'll say something to sum up
Yeah, Trish, I think I was muted. I'm sorry.
Okay.
If you could finish up with some of your thoughts, and then we'll go on to Linda for her final thoughts. And if
Sure.
Ann could put up some slides that we have, that would be great.
I guess I'd like to leave saying, working with the soil makes you happy. And the more we get connected with our environment and the people growing food and trying to grow our own food and being a part of those communities, I think will help us thrive in life and make us more of a stronger community. And, as a strong community, I think we will have a more healthier environment because we'll be more aware of our surroundings and what we want to see in this world. And we'll also be wonderful leaders for the future generations to come who are going to have to take care of this place. So I'd just like to say I'm really appreciative that we're having this talk tonight, because this is just the beginning of what really we need to keep doing more and more. And I hope that you can leave here tonight and talk to somebody tomorrow about what you might have learned tonight, or go visit one of the farms or the community garden. That sounds amazing. I really want to go down to New Rochelle and check out Linda's project there. And I'm very grateful to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Trish. And Linda, some final thoughts from you?
Well, this has been a wonderful experience because I've learned so much from Jack and Trish, and absolutely I'm coming to visit. The community garden concept is an age-old concept. Community gardens were established at really difficult times in our history, during recessions, during war. And now our community garden during this pandemic has been like a salve for the souls, not only for the gardeners, but for the community at large. So the one thing I want to say is that this is a wonderful experiment that keeps getting better, and it has so many tentacles to it, and we're teaching so many people how to do so many different things, including getting along.
Thank you very much, Linda. I'd just like to say a few things, and then I think Tom Ruth is going to wrap up and give us the results of the poll. I'd like to thank all three of you, Jack, Trish, and Linda, for the time that you put in, the considerations that you give to such important issues, and for being here tonight. I'd like to thank Patricia Watson, Bill Kellner, Richard Saravay, Tom Ruth, and Ann Swaim for working together to put this program on, past programs, also Rick Kaufman, past programs, and we anticipate having 2 more programs on food over the course of the next few months. I would again just remind you about Drawdown 2020. We will have a link for anyone who participated Monday night. My understanding is that you will get a link with the video of that program on Monday. And if you didn't participate, we will have the link and we can certainly provide it. So thank you for being here tonight. And Tom, if you want to wrap up and let us know the results of the poll.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ken. And my thanks also to the wonderful panel, Jack, Trish, and Linda. It's tremendous to hear you folks expound on your knowledge and passion. It's inspiring. Thank you very much. Wanted to invite you to, if you haven't fill out the poll, it's still there. Only takes a second. There are only 2 questions. And don't forget, thanks for being part of our discussion tonight. Also, don't forget the upcoming events that we showed before. And somewhere there may be another slide that shows that yet again. There we go. Please plan to join us. The polls right now show
the poll has finished.
Have you learned something new tonight? 95% said that they have. Thank you very much. It's been very, very beneficial to everybody. What steps will you take after viewing this presentation? 52% said they're going to find a local source for some of these good things. 26% said they'll explore producing their own food. And 80%, 81% said they want to visit one or more of the sites mentioned in the program. So panel, you guys are going to be busy with visitors, I think. That's terrific. And there's other things as well. So thanks very much for being here. Thanks for participating in the poll. Thanks for joining us, and we wish you good eating and good health.
And also thanks again to Carol Griffiths. And the video of this will be available for anyone who wants it. So just let us know. Thank you very much to everyone. Good night.